Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar presented by the Community Development Society. Today's webinar will explore emerging research trends in CDS's two journals, Community Development and Local Development and Society. Our panelists are Dr. Craig Talmage. He is the editor-in-chief of Community Development. He's an associate professor and chair of the Department of Business Management and Entrepreneurship at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, where he also serves as director of the Bozzuto Center for Entrepreneurship. He also chairs the City of Geneva's Local Development Corporation, serving as vice chair of the Business Improvement District. Welcome, Craig. Also today, one of our panelists is Dr. Rhonda Phillips. She is the president of St. Mary's College of Maryland and founding co-editor of Local Development and Society. Welcome, Rhonda.
Thank you, Tammy.
Our last but not least panelist is Dr. Sophia Kotsiri. She is the managing editor for Local Development Society as well as Community Development. She is also an economics lecturer at Santa Clara University. Welcome, Sophia. Many thanks to the panelists for being a part of today's webinar, and we hope all of the attendees enjoy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. And we're going to give you, for those who are not able to make the wonderful CDS conference in Geneva, New York, where I hail from now, we're going to give a background on both the journals and where they're at, some key themes that we shared, and then we'll really want to have this a bit more informal at the end for people to ask questions and really chime in for what they need. I'm going to be your, for lack of a better term, slide guide as we go through, just so you see some of the stats and the things. Unfortunately, Norm Walzer wasn't able to join us today, but I did co-present with him, and so I do know what he talked about, and I'll be taking over his slides for today as well. Sophia and Rhonda, anytime you feel like, especially with Local Development Society, which is what Rhonda shepherds, and Sophia really shepherds both of us as our managing editor, this will be just pop on in with any comments you have, and then we'll open it up at the end to folks who have questions. So we're going to do background and purpose for each of the journals. We have high overlaps based on which articles and things that we like, but Local Development Society has a particular focus, and it kind of zeroes in particular areas, while Community Development has a bit broader of focus, but I'll also give some parameters and guide rails as well. So Local Development Society focuses on development and its impact on social issues, and specifically is more interested in long-term projects. We are in both journals really not looking to really publish something that was like a one-time thing. We really want to have things that are long-term that can be shown. We also really like in both journals, specifically Local Development Society, is about innovation, anything in community and economic development that is innovative, as well as things that can bridge or compare sort of community development with economic development. Both journals as well like to play in different playgrounds. Multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, or some people even use the word transdisciplinarity is really great. And we really want those, again, innovative techniques, and how do we address today's challenges? How do we be prepared for future challenges? And how do we engage with the bridging the divide between scholars, nerdy theoreticians, as well as the on-the-ground practitioners, community members, leaders? And so economic development practices is not the only aspect of the journal. It's about local development and society. And so, yes, if you're working in housing, cultural programs, tourism, quality of life, these are, of course, welcome, but even broader from there. And so if it has a community development or economic development aspect, or a local aspect, really highlighting that notion of localism or regionalism, this would be a really good journal for folks to consider. Anything additional there, Rhonda or Sophia, on just the broader theme and what we love about LD&S?
Sure. Well, one, it's very interdisciplinary. So we look at all different types of issues and long-term effects on societal developmental impact. So if you have an idea, please send it to us. We're happy to discuss it with you if you are trying to find a journal that fits your work.
And I would also like to mention that we occasionally receive manuscripts in the community development that we find them more appropriate for the local development and society journal, so we can have this transfer If you submit something that is not a good match for the community development, there is a recommendation that it can be transferred to the local development journal.
Wonderful. And this is a really great partnership. Having Sophia as managing editor really, really helps. But also, full disclosure, Rhonda was on my dissertation committee and we remained great friends. So thank you very much. So we do have editorial boards. We continue to update them. If you're interested in serving on the editorial board, we'll have a little bit of an ask later on in the presentation, but do consider that. And we have been really encouraged in community development to broaden our international representation. Local Development Society has done a very good job, and I admire them for that. So what are some characteristics of accepted articles? So this is from Norm and our team here, and it's really needs to make sure that it has community economic development. I will tell you straight up that when I look at community development articles, one of the first things I do is actually see if anyone uses the phrase community development in their article. Local Development Society would probably be pretty good to use local in your article at some point. Or really the notion of economic development, or really just show that you are relevant to the topic area. We really want things that are going to extend beyond the current literature or build upon the current literature. If you were publishing an article that looks the same as one that has been done in the past, what's the innovative spin? Did you do something different with the method? Did you do something different with the theory? Are there different implications? Are there different practitioner insights? Please, 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 that's what we really want. We're not necessarily in Local Development Society is more discouraging of AI in the research. There are particular methods, and Taylor and Francis, our larger body, has guidelines on how to best use AI. And we also now have an AI disclosure aspect. So do keep in mind that if you're going to use AI, we can have larger conversations in the Q&A about that. But what we want to do is sort of say, hey, what is unique? What is it about the story of this community? What is the story of this approach? What are those aspects? And we are always interested in both journals of either improving, rethinking, or creating new theoretical or analytical frameworks. So it's good to, when someone puts them out, we do get a number of thought pieces, both journals, but really community development. We'll get ones that are kind of conceptual models. We need to test those models. We actually need to make sure that there is empirical and qualitative research behind all of this that really helps us. And it's really important too that I will say that when we get articles that do have a lot of writing challenges or grammatical issues, Taylor and Francis has particular writing support that we'll encourage people to explore. We have other folks in our network that we are glad to connect you with. But in the aspects is we can kind of see in the world of AI too, that there are certain patterns in how AI can be used, but it can be very, very good in helping assist in some of these areas. There are challenges, I will say, when it comes to AI, and it does have a replicative, like a pretty like identifiable style of writing. And so that is something to be concerned to like pay attention to. AI I use with my students. AI likes to use the word ultimately a lot. So be careful that the language that you use is still how one would speak, or still how would be writing in a scientific or professional way. It is really important that we're not just tossing in references, and that we're really making sure that things are clear and neat and the analysis is clear. I will say in community development, we are really pushing for people, especially who are doing qualitative research that we love, to make sure that you're including strategies for trustworthy and rigor. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But it's really, you want to make sure that you've dotted your T's and crosses your I's. And while many journals have moved to an open reference style, so it's like, okay, you wrote it in MLA or you wrote it in Harvard and we'll fix it on the back end. While we can do that with Taylor and Francis and Rutledge, we really abide by more of the APA style. And when someone doesn't make those conversions or follow our style guidelines, it's kind of a red flag already, saying, hey, you know, like maybe you just kind of got denied somewhere else and now you're tossing it to us. And so we really want that formatting there. Sophia or Rhonda, do you have anything more to add on this sort of aspect here of what makes a good accepted article, or at least on the front end?
Yes, I mean, obviously having the format and the guide, but making sure that it goes within the scope of either of the journals rather than just something that would completely not be a fit. And that just makes it a little bit more difficult to see how it could go through review if there's just absolutely not a fit. But honestly, like Craig is saying, making sure the format and the style so that it's easier for our reviewers to read and to see how it could fit is a plus.
Sophia, what stands out as you move it towards the next stage?
I totally agree. One of the very first things that we check is the references. And as you mentioned earlier, we often receive articles that they have no citation of either of the journal, local development or community development. From my side, I also checked a similarity plagiarism report that often comes back with some red flags. We often receive articles that are where the information of authors or affiliations have not been removed, or the figures and tables are not in the right order. So these are all some details that we take into consideration before we process an article and send it to a reviewer, to two reviewers at least.
Exactly. One of the other things that I like to tell early scholars or those newer to writing, and I still even deal with this with some of my more seasoned scholars who I adore, is if you have a reference that is in your discussion, but not in your introduction, it seems a little sloppy. And only in the sense there are certain occasions and exceptions where that is totally acceptable. But really, if you're commenting on what are you adding to the field and you didn't have that at the beginning, and now you're just throwing a reference to back up something that you found that after the facts you found, that could be a little bit of a dubious red flag for us. And so we want to make sure that, that we're keeping that. And as well as it's good to have current references. Now, that doesn't mean that every reference has to be from 2025, but it's really helpful to see that you have kept updated. Because when we see older references, and I'll give you an example, if I see a paper that comes in that only has references up to 2022, I have this feeling that this paper's been shopped around a lot and that this author really hasn't given some extra attention maybe to the beginning and the end of their article. All right, here's some statistics just so you get a sense for local development society. The acceptance rate is about is 20% with a 58-day average. There have been 58 manuscripts. This is from the conference. We're going to get our newest report from our wonderful journal that we can synthesize so we can Taylor and Francis sends us quarterly updates. And so we should have new things if you want to know the new stats. Additionally, to keep the new stats updated on our website, if you'd like to check that out under the stats for each of the journals. Both journals, and I'll talk about community development briefly, are getting worldwide attention, which is really amazing. So, and our downloads are up. We are on a really positive trajectory, and people are tending to find that the publication process is going well. We do know that some authors do have challenges with Scholar One. Sophia, myself, and Rhonda are always glad to help you navigate some challenges with our online portal, or if you run into any issues with the proofing system. I'm human. I've messed up. I've had typos that I've had to correct and have a correction later on. We've had plenty of moments where we needed to address some things. We fortunately have been pretty good about not having some plagiarism skirt through recently, which is really good. The Taylor and Francis people are great to work with and do their job. But I will say if there's any sort of slowdown, it just means that we're kind of bogged down probably with some bigger special issue we're working on, or we're having trouble finding reviewers. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the numbers on both sides, I'll just say, are going up and looking good. Any comments on the numbers, Sophia or Rhonda?
No, I think you said it all. It's great. Great stats. Thank you.
I would only like to mention that selecting open access publication would be a good option for authors. Article will be free to access immediately on publications, something that will increase visibility and readership as well.
Yes. Open access is really great. If you have the opportunity to build it into your grant submissions, if you know you're going to have particular into your grant budgets that you know you're going to publish off of, it is a really good thing to put out there. It helps us. And then we mentioned that it's really important that people cite our journals. I will say if people overly cite us, let's just say you're publishing in community development and you only cited community development articles, that actually doesn't help us, to be honest with you. It doesn't really boost our impact factor. What helps us is when other journals out there are citing us, and open access helps a lot with that. And so the more that we can get the word out about our journals, the better we all do. So Norm has put together a really, really nice list of what makes an effective review. So it is important. We always need help. Yes, there's always a kind of a shortage in reviewers. We have wonderful folks on our editorial boards that help out, but you really should only review a paper that you're qualified to review. And so let's make sure that we keep doing that. And then what we don't want is a cursory review where you're just kind of looking at like just the little pieces, and we don't really need you to go in and check all the typos. Like we had a lot of people that sometimes just feel like, I don't have time to review, I'm only on page 2. I'm like, how are you only on page 2? Right? We actually have a wonderful production team that can really help us out. And so the production team is really, really helpful in those aspects. But again, the reviewers, that's not your job. Your job is to not just grade the paper, but really make constructive aspects. Like, what do we need from, like, to build on the literature? What is the unique thing being said here? And what are the actual revisions that can be done? And for us as editors, what are the revisions if it is got some serious flaws? What are the ones that just won't get the paper there that we really need to understand? Like, this is the time for them to seek either new opportunities or go back to the drawing board in some areas if they want to be a good fit with us. And so it's really helpful too that if you're going to revise a paper and you know that, or sorry, if you're going to review a paper and you know you're not going to have time to like look at a revision later on, that you either let us know or, you know, maybe this is the time you kind of pass on that review, and we'll get you at another time when you're able to kind of relook at, if especially if even at a first glance, because you get to look at things before you agree. Even at a first glance, you're like, this is going to be a lot for me. And so it's really, really important that we know that. We generally want reviews. Some journals are different. Community development wants reviews in 30 days, and that 30 days begins when you click the agree button. And we hope that people don't gamify that too much and wait till later and then hit the agree button. But we really need 30 days, and we can give some extensions. But I've kind of found, for lack of a better term, out of coaching in the marketplace of wonderful journals, that a 60 to 90-day sweet spot on the longest an article could sit is really the max you ever want to have in order to continue to have a reputable journal. And so it's really, really key, because people will follow up with us. They will get frustrated. We do have moments where a reviewer will say, yes, I'm going to do it. And then takes forever to get that second reviewer or that third reviewer. And so that can be a really challenge. So if you can't review it, just be honest with us. We'll find you at another time. And it's totally great. And then don't feel like you need to rewrite the paper as if you're the author. You're not the author. They are. And we're supposed to be developmental and encouraging. So I'll toss it over to our team here. And Norm has joined us. And thank you, Norm, to make any further comments here.
I think you're right on target. I'm sorry I'm late. I had another commitment that I had to keep. So I think the big difficulty we have that causes delays is just because, and you may have said this before I got on, but the idea that people don't want to do a second review. So if the paper has to go out, if there needs to be major revisions or something like that, we need to have then a second opinion on whether or not those reviews met what the first person indicated should be done. And that sometimes takes a while.
That's really good.
Welcome, Norm. If I may say two things. First, the system gives the opportunity for reviewers to suggest other reviewers that may be a better fit to review papers. And this is also very helpful. So if you have colleagues that you can recommend for the review, that is great help for us. And the other thing I want to mention is that especially for junior researchers, we provide certifications for review completion, and we can always give that for your institution as an extra incentive to review.
And if you do have students out there, graduate level or really talented seniors that you think this would be a good opportunity for maybe them to jump in, where we welcome them registering in our Scholar One system and getting there and reaching out to us. And we'd be glad to see if we have something either that maybe has sat for a little bit that we'd like to get going, or something that just came in that we think would be really good for them to have an experience with, because it's really important that we get at least one really quality review and one good review. And so that's because, and everyone has different times. We understand that. But if we get a review back that's one paragraph, we will lose it. Like, we're like, no, not a one paragraph review. Give us something really good. Every once in a while, I've got a review back that was one sentence, and I'm like, oh no. So we're always, and these are rare occasions, but they do happen. We're always looking to kind of raise up the next generation or coach people. All right. So, Norm, do you want to make any comments on some of the things that we're seeing on special issues or things that are in progress right now?
Well, right now, the Journal of our Local Development and Society is going into our volume 6, number 3, and those articles are the ones that have been accepted are pretty much being lined up. We'll have several book reviews on that issue as well. As we look ahead, we do 3 issues a year. So as we're looking ahead at the volume 7, which would be 2020 or 2026, we will probably have the entrepreneurship system, entrepreneurial ecosystems working. That'll either be volume 1 or volume 2. So right now we're sort of looking at that. We're interested in transitioning businesses or retaining businesses. When business owners retire, that's an interest. I think the idea also of how you change existing buildings and institutions in your community, how you repurpose them to another use. I think that's something that we're seeing more and more interest being displayed in. So if you have some ideas there, and as we look ahead, we have, as Craig has probably mentioned earlier, we have the theme issue, which is the entire issue devoted to a certain topic. And that's one that, for example, Jean Theodori did on second on the top of the list there, interactional theory. But we also have what I consider themed issues, where you might have 5 or 6 or 7 papers or articles that are really around a specific topic, but that's not enough to make an entire issue. So as a result, if you're interested in and know of some people who are doing if you know 3 or 4 colleagues or others who are doing papers on a related topic, consider suggesting them to us as a possible theme issue, where it wouldn't be a complete issue, but you would have a block of articles around a certain topic. And the reason that that's so important, I think, is that when you're teaching, as all of us know, when you're teaching, it's really helpful if you're covering a topic. And then you can say to your class, we'll go to this issue of a journal or this place, and here are 3 or 4 related articles that you can use in your reading list. And I think it's better that way than to have to give, 5 or 6 different separate sources. Just a little more easy to manage. So that's one we've been working with. But I think other than that, we're interested in the kind of things where what you're doing in community development really impacts society in general. And those are the topics we're really interested in.
That's great. So here are some trending issues. Norm, since you're here, why don't you share with them what do you think is hot right now?
Well, it's kind of hard to say what's quotes hot in different parts of the world, really. And we're, I think, more cognizant maybe at LDNS. We get a lot of articles from a lot of different countries. And so it's not so much focused on the United States. We actually would like to have more articles from the United States, because we'd like to make the comparisons with the United States and other countries. So that's something in the back of our minds. So it worked in the US somewhere, would it work somewhere in Pakistan or some other place? And so being able to build those bridges, I think, is kind of useful. So this entrepreneurial climate topic, what does it mean to cause an entrepreneurial climate in your community? Entrepreneurial climate defined as people starting businesses, doing creative things, but what do you need to have in the community in order to make these kinds of things occur? And Don Mackey and I are working on this themed issue that will kind of discuss some of those issues. And there's several papers being written on that. I think
That's great.
retaining, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you're ready, we'll go to some of the general topics that we're seeing in your journal.
Oh, okay. So do you want me to work on this list or just, these are just a list, you can read them. These are the kind of things that we're looking at.
Here's some other ones.
I think the longer term issues of population aging, this is a problem all over the world, or an issue all over the world. And I think trying to find new and innovative ways to retain youth, to retain elderly people, or to somehow, make this come together. The remote work issue, we're seeing a lot of interest being generated. The problem sometimes we have, at least in our journal, is that we'll get a case study. So it'll be a certain thing happened in a certain place in a certain country. But the submission that comes in doesn't make any effort or is able to show how this might work elsewhere. So ideally for us, if you're addressing one of these topics, what you need to do is figure out, has it worked elsewhere? How does your example relate? How does it differ? Those kind of things. The impacts on downtowns, I think, are really an important kind of issue. What's happening with respect to population changes, strategies. Migrants or immigrants is an issue that we're seeing more and more of. How do we deal with housing? What kind of services do they need? What contributions do they make? Then I think the whole rural issue, there seems to be a lot of interest now that rural is in fact becoming more important or more viable, more attractive, these kinds of things. And so how can we deal with those kinds of questions? The new industries is always an issue, and I think this is probably both industries. The AI industries, what's that doing to the workforce? These kinds of things, the services that are required. The public service finances is an issue that we're seeing around the world, innovative ways of trying to do that. How to deliver services more effectively with AI is also an issue that we're seeing more interest in.
Okay, so I'm going to pop two ahead and then we'll pop one back. So here are some of the papers that Norm, you had noted were really frequently downloaded. So Norm, Sophia, and Rhonda, some of these may be open access, which is really helpful, right? Is another way to get a lot of downloads, but sometimes they get picked up by news sources. Sometimes your university news source may pick it up and actually get it out there. We actually have a way to look at a score based on, has it been tweeted? Is it on X? Is it on Facebook? Is it in particular news archives? And so we can get reports back on that. Any sort of things that stood out about these articles that you want to mention?
Yeah, I'll just jump in just really quickly and say that articles that have some applied research or applied dimensions, such as that from the participatory budgeting special issue, you'll notice that several of those topics from that issue are some of our most popular downloads. And so, yes, of course, original research and ideas and pushing the boundaries of theory, it's all excellent. It's also good to have very well-placed applied research that talks about tools and ways to do things in your community, and things like participatory budgeting or other tools that we can use to increase outcomes. You'll notice from the most frequent downloads, there's quite a few of those sort of applied topics, I like to think of them. So that's always good to think about too. And often those will be the ones that will be picked up in the other media sources as well. But not always. Sometimes those that are theoretical or pushing a boundary, say on use of AI and community and local development, those kind of things may be picked up as well.
That's great. So if you want to get involved with local development society, there are a number of ways. And so you have the team right here, and I'll show the contact information in a moment. Again, this recording will be provided, and we will be able to send the slides to folks too. But yeah, so what are the best ways for people to reach out, or what are we talked about easy steps for young folks, connecting students. What are some things we didn't mention before we turn it over, show some more contact information, then talk about community development?
I think the list pretty well, lays it out. It's and I encourage people a lot, especially as you're new coming into the field, that register as a reviewer. And I think it gets you some professional exposure, but it also allows you to see from the other perspective, what is good or bad about the way something is done or changes that could be made. So I think this registering as a reviewer and a referee is really a timely or is an important kind of thing for a person starting out. And then the other kind of things are pretty self-explanatory as you go down through, I think. Rhonda or Sophia may want to just comment on some of them.
Sorry, my connection cut out there for a minute. Did you say my name, Nora?
Just see if
I
you have
just-
any other ways to add and get
You
connected.
don't want to add to
Oh,
it.
okay. Yes, we're always looking for reviewers, looking for ideas for special issues, themed issues. So feel free to reach out.
We did get a message in the chat that said, are we distinguishing between reviewers and referees? And the answer is no. So we can talk about different types of reviews. Book reviews are welcome in both journals. We can do practice reviews. We can do case review. We have a pretty broad. If you have particular questions like that, you're welcome to ask at the end, but also you can reach out to any of us on our team and we can kind of share that. And we do have guidelines for reviewers that we are glad to send to people that are interested. And there are some general guidelines as well that Taylor and Francis provides too. So if you want to take a quick screenshot of some contact information right now, you're welcome to do that. And this is a reminder to me that I owe Josh Newton one right here a book review. So I'll be working on that this weekend.
Craig, if you don't mind, since you're going to probably jump into the CD journal too, I'd like to intro Norm. Thank you, Norm, for being a part of the webinar. He is a professor and director emeritus in the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs, a past president of CDS, and founding co-editor of Local Development Society. Thanks again for joining us, Norm. Thank you.
So Sophia is also our managing editor of the journal. Norm and Rhonda are past editors of this journal. And so thank you for their continued mentorship and all of our collaboration. We are just really appreciate being able to really get the stories out there, to really keep telling the good word about community development, economic development, local development in today's world, and being able to showcase it from all over the world. And so just thank you everyone as well for your time and being on our call. My job is to talk to you about our other journal, Community Development. It is just called Community Development. I get a lot of, are you Community Development Journal? Well, that's actually published by our lovely folks in Oxford, and they're wonderful. And they're also connected with the wonderful International Association for Community Development. So that's really great. But we are Community Development with Taylor and Francis. So just in case you get any sort of branding challenges, let us know. We used to be called Community Development, Journal of the Community Development Society. We are just now called Community Development now. Maybe it's to save on typing, but I will say it has been a way for us to showcase that we are big, but also we are specific. And so please, thank you and really appreciate you promoting both our journals after today. So the focus of community development is also broader than specifically the focus of local development society. And so keeping that in mind, I will say that we have a big tent approach. We have a special issue right now that is going to be multiple volume, like not multiple volumes, but multiple issues specifically around community development and tourism. And Huston's on this call. Thank you for being there and all the leadership there. We did receive an overwhelming number of submissions. So please know that we're still catching up. If you haven't heard back from us, we are getting there. We just literally didn't have enough reviewers to cover how excited people were. So we're working through that, and you should hear back from us soon on a few of those specific papers. And if for some reason ever you get a paper stuck in the system being like, what's happening? They are rare. It does happen, but message Sophia and I, and we'll make sure we clean it up and get back to you. And we promise that, and we're both very good at email, and we'll get back to you right away. We do take papers of different sorts, and they don't necessarily have to be in full empirical articles. We do say, though, if it's empirical, and that you need to make sure that you show your strategies for reliability and validity in the qualitative sense. You need to know that it's trustworthy and rigorous. Not everything has to be generalizable, but we really need to make sure that we're playing by the right rules. If you're doing ethnography, we have a particular article that has guidelines on what are the best ways to showcase that. And so if you're ever wondering, like, hey, did I, for lack of a better term, check all the boxes, or am I making sure that I'm getting past so that I don't put up any red flags that aren't really there? Send Sophia and I a message. We'd be glad to share with you some of the articles that we found have really the best practices of what needs to be done. So if we're looking at practice pieces, say you're a practitioner, we often take those as well. So if you want to be a practitioner that showcases a particular intervention, a particular story, a particular case, reach out to us, and then we'll have a conversation of whether or not you want your piece to be peer reviewed by 2 peer reviewers, or if you'd rather just have it reviewed by your editorial team. And then we have ways of showcasing that and addressing that. And so sometimes the hardest piece to publish is your first one. So just, we're glad to be coaches, really glad to help you along and see what we can do. So we are getting a lot of submissions. This number is now out of date. It is much higher than that. But given that we're rejecting more articles because we become more popular. And so I continue to think that the number is going to go in the proper direction as we're saying this. We do want evocative articles that are really like getting people stirred up, because then people talk about the journal and they get excited. But we also want really good, solid research, really good, solid theoretical pieces. And we really want to make sure, after we kind of catch up on this like extreme enthusiasm for our wonderful tourism articles, we have other special issues coming, specifically one around marginalized communities across the world. We have one in honor of Cornelia Flora, and we have a special issue that we're working on that is really focused on a particular sort of set of communities. And so there's a lot of ways that we can do this, but there's a lot of enthusiasm. And so just that being said, we're so excited to publish pieces, and just make sure that you aren't hitting some of those things that we talked about at the beginning. I'll have some more advice too. All right. So like we said, open access pieces get some good press, but we understand that that's a pay to play aspect, and that is challenging for some folks. There are sometimes things that get picked up, which are really great. And so eventually, sometimes if it's popular enough with Taylor and Francis, they'll actually do a way where you can actually read it open access, but not necessarily download it open access. If you have more questions about that, I'm glad to kind of get a little bit into that, but it can be really, really exciting if you can build this into any grant applications, or if there's ways. We do get it as pricey. And so if you can't do open access, one of the coolest things that you can do is actually just get press around your article. Have your wonderful institution write summaries about it. Have your wonderful institution do a write-up or a tweet, or you name it, about it. And that is always good for us, and as well you. Sophia, Norm, or Rhonda, any sort of advice on any of this aspect, on how you might see people building this in? Sophia, what questions do you get about open access?
I do not get questions about open access, but if I'm not mistaken, you have about 30% more visibility if you select the open access. If I recall the number correctly, 30% more citations, and more than 6 times more downloads. Selecting the open access.
I would agree. I think that if you can afford to do it, that it's clearly a better strategy.
Absolutely. So these are our 2 articles that have received the most buzz. The answer is because they've had people behind them with trajectory that have been pushing them. Sometimes it just, You don't know sometimes what makes something go viral, especially in community development and what we're doing. However, there are some really kind of cool topics that you see with local development society and with us that you can see maybe are more of interest or more timely given when they come out and things like that. It's also not a bad idea if you have a particular piece to have your local news service if they're interested in it. I'll give you an example. I published an article on breweries, and the local newspaper talked about that, which was great. I don't know if they cited it in particular to make it, hit the right metrics, but that is always kind of a fun way to say, hey, look at this project we did, and look, it's also in the journal. Here's some of our most cited pieces. Again, tourism has been pretty hot for us. Wonderful connections, university community partnerships. We've seen specifically some really good things around communities and schools. Really looking at, we do both urban and rural development. Sometimes people think it's more rural. It's actually, we do both. And some larger theory things here about things like you see here, disempowerment versus empowerment, bigger thinking, big thought pieces, or with kind of practical bents can be very, very helpful. Okay, so I got some practical advice on where to get started. And so this is some of the strategies that I have used and that have worked pretty well. And so I'll share that with you. So we talked about what makes a good review, what makes a good peer-reviewed article. Well, it needs to be interesting. It needs to be about an emerging or pressing need. It's got to be well written. We covered that pretty much in depth. It needs to add substantially to the literature. Here's the best thing you could do. Put it in like your first few paragraphs, how you are adding to the literature. Tell the authors, tell the readers right away so that we know the reviewers can go, okay, like, are they living up to that claim? What is the novelty here? Because if you save it just for the discussion in the end, you might get a tired reviewer who goes, oh, now I see, as opposed to seeing it at the beginning. You want to show how you've built on the literature. I came from a training in psychology. So when we got in psychology, the discussion sections were all, yep, this fits this study that happened. Yep, this fits this study that happened. Yep, this fit. We are not necessarily only interested in that. We actually really want to know what you think. The discussion section is your moment for expression. Where should practice go? Where should research go? Where should education go? If necessary, where should policy go? So that is a good way to take it as opposed to just saying, yep, it fits this. Yep, it fits this. And it's really much more interesting of an article to do it that way, to offer new insights and approaches. Limitations we can in community development, you choose. If you have methodological limitations, you can put that in your methods section, or you can save that for your discussion section. Just make sure it's very clear, make sure it's labeled well, so that we can understand that. I will say it can get a little boring, for lack of a better term, to just read, oh my goodness, if we could do a long-term study with more people in a random sample, like, no, like, just, it's okay, we get it. Like everyone, this is community work. Like many of us are just doing our best. And so depending on the paper and what particular thing you're doing, make sure that you are being honest and forthright about your limitations, but don't feel like you have to be like sort of this machine produced same thing that we read in every article. So that being said, we know that papers have limitations, and that's why we publish them so we can build off of them, do more research, and do those things. If you're going to do something innovative, we did publish one of our first articles, and I think we now have a second article on autoethnography. That is a controversial methodology for some folks. Some folks aren't on board with that. Make sure that you have the best backing. We encourage people to do citations in their method section saying, why did I do it this way? And why is this acceptable? We definitely need to go beyond, of course, this little project in this little place. And like, we love those stories and those things, but maybe that's better in a collection of community cases that can be featured in the journal. And so making sure that it's more practical and that there's a summary at the end. I'm big on agendas. Say what you're going to say and then tell us at the end what you said. It's really helpful to our reviewers and can be really great. And again, we're going to take questions at the end and we'll have an open-ended discussions, but these are some just kind of things to get folks started. And again, we're sharing this information, the slides and the recordings as well. So if you want to know which journal is best, Well, you got the authors right here. You can ask us on the call, but really send us a message. I read abstracts. I'll even glance through a paper ahead of time. No big deal. Oftentimes, straight from the title, I can tell you which one's better for us. And I also tell you if you're not a good fit for either. And so this is, we're always down. I even take phone calls. It's super fun, just getting to know what people are doing. It's a part of networking and getting to know each other as well, not just publishing. And we're not here to be cutthroat or gatekeepers. We're actually here to support the field and what we can do. But like Sophia said, if you submit an article and you didn't submit one thing from either journal, did you even read us? So that's kind of the questions. It's like, oh, maybe you should see kind of the style. That doesn't mean we want you to replicate it. It doesn't mean you can't be innovative, but we do want you to kind of understand who your audience is. And so checking out our journals is really, really helpful. Great ways to do that. Become a reviewer, join our editorial board, write a book review for us. A lot of different ways. And we actually can take special issues and turn them into book series. There's a lot of cool things we can do. And so those are ways to see what might work. I'm big on publishing off of your dissertation or thesis. Rhonda Phillips right on this call. She gave me the script. Turn your literature review into a conceptual theoretical piece. Turn your methods into a methodological piece. And then your results and findings. Use those literature methods, which you've pared down, into one or more pieces that have something unique to say. I like to quote Lori Garkovich at University of Kentucky. She had this Post-it note when I interviewed for a job there once upon a time that said, there's no such thing as an unpublished manuscript. There's just a researcher who gave up. I will be honest with you. I'm learning to give up on more publications than I used to, but others were worth fighting for. And sometimes you just need a teammate, someone else, the colleague to look at it. Sometimes you need a nice face like us to take a peek at it. We're really, really glad to support people wherever they are on their journey. If you have particular projects where, let's just say, the methods went awry, it just didn't answer the question or didn't work, we're fine with publishing articles about how things are flawed, like that this method isn't working anymore, or we need to innovate. We're glad to publish on your innovations in those particular methods. And we're also really glad to up the rigor and publish on having like particular guidelines. Like this article, I worked with some anthropologists on, really to help us better understand how do we not look silly, like that we don't look, fluffy in how we do ethnographic research in the community development world. Because some pieces we're not sharing enough information and we offer critique and guidelines. And so that if an ethnographer like from anthropology would read some of our pieces, they might be like, that's not ethnography. So really, really, really helpful to have guides. So if you have guides for using particular things, like I said, autoethnography is new to our field. There's a number of different approaches. Maybe we should rethink how we're doing ripple effects MACB now. Maybe we should rethink or have different strategies for power analysis and what things are working in your group. That would be very, very helpful to us. Okay. Book reviews are really great. If you're going to read a book for your dissertation, if you're going to read a book to write one of your articles, write a review of it. Doesn't have to be long, 4 or 5 pages, totally fine. I found that to be very, very helpful in what I've done. Also, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have to go to these hoity-toity things that have big university speakers. Read their book. You're reading their book anyways, because you're entertaining these wonderful folks. Hey, why not publish on it? So these are really, really good ways to help people know what are they going to get out of different things. Other ones, we also take pedagogical pieces. I publish a lot on some of the things I teach. And so please, if you have particular pieces about this strategy is working in the community development classroom, or we need to rethink how we do community development education, local development education, please, 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 we're hungry for those things. And you are welcome to disagree with things that are published. I think it's kind of fun when people submit commentary pieces or letters to the editor. Community development doesn't have to have you be invited. Sometimes we will invite you, but we will take unsolicited ones. So if you do, it's better to give me a heads up so I don't go, what is this coming from? But we will publish these different pieces. We have a lot of flexibility with our relationship with Taylor and Francis, and I'm really, really grateful for it. Okay. Like I said, if you have practice pieces, they're great. We can publish on some of the data. We can help you with that. If you want to publish off of data, we You are welcome to share your data in certain cases. You do not have to. We do not have that requirement. I get that question from time to time. You can publish about your methods, yes, but also we take critiques. And if you want to critique a project you did and said, I'll be honest with you, I've done a number of projects on food insecurity that just have not worked out. And there are so many reasons why it didn't work out. Those stories probably should be told. And so this could be really, really good. We talked about thematic issues. We have an issue on the dark sides of community development that just came out. The progressive qualitative methodologies has just come out. And then we're gonna have more on tourism and other things. If you have interest in a special issue, contact Sophia and I, but I'm gonna be real with you. We are booked for about a year. So we can't really handle another special issue for a little bit. We are kind of packed to the brims on what we need to get through first. And so hit us up next CDS conference in Georgia, and then we can talk about special issue and things like that. I'm not saying don't start the conversation now. Glad to have the conversation, but we are booked to the brims. Seriously. Again, these special issues can turn into books. If you're interested in some sort of book, working with Routledge and things like that, the Community Development Society in Georgia is a good way to start kind of networking with people and talking about that in July. Also, you can reach out to Mark Brennan or Paul LaChapelle. Their information is on our websites, but we're glad to share that information. They have 2 different book series that they manage. And Routledge and Taylor and Francis are the same company. And they have a very generous policy on how much can be reprinted in a book form. And it depends on which sort of pathway you go. So really, really fun, as well as gives a moment to do an update. If you actually want to have it reprint in a book volume, you can actually do some updates to it, which is kind of fun too. Okay. So I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So I do want to show you some issues that we might see. So if you're a new author, have someone read your piece before you turn it in. One of the strategies I used is we have a wonderful admin in my department. Her name is Cindy. I would have her read a number of my pieces, especially ones that I did on older adult education, and she would read it, and I always thank her in the acknowledgments. She was a great editor. She really had a lot of fun reading it. There's nothing wrong. I mean, my mom and dad read my dissertation, and they caught lots of typos. So it's really good to make sure you're following those style guidelines, that you're using like the word community development or local development. For those who just joined us, make sure you kind of say the name of the journal in some sort of way or parts of the name of the journal in your article. Make sure you have a really good literature review. That if you do get revisions, please, please, please take the comments seriously. One of the things we're seeing right now is that people will revise their articles and highlight the changes, but then not really write an author response letter saying how they address the changes. That makes our job a lot harder to accept you. So this needs to be really, really like we're telling you now, make the changes and talk about how you made the changes. This sort of meta level is really important to us, and it helps us work with the reviewers, especially those on the fence. Sophia's got something to say. Let's do
Yes,
it.
and this also makes reviewers very upset. This is something an email that I receive very often. Reviewers are very frustrated if they don't get a separate page with how their comments were addressed. So just highlighting the changes or sending the new updated version is not helping reviewers at all, and it delays the process for having your paper reviewed.
It really does. And we're running into it a lot more than we used to. And so it's really important that people know that. So we only have a few more slides here. I just want to say it's just important. You are doing special work. You're doing really amazing things, regardless if you're a new scholar or a seasoned scholar. Just make sure that you tell us that it's great. Be confident, be assertive, do your best to eliminate passive voice. Like you're doing good work, and share it with us. Because if you can be clear about how you're advancing scholarship or advancing practice or even policy and education, that's going to be so helpful. We do, and we're sending out these slides to folks, but there are this table that we put together kind of showcases some of the major issues that happen. Most of the time, for me, I read the start of the paper and I don't know where you're going. That's tough, right? Not everything has to be hypothesis based. That's not the journal we are. However, we need to know what your research question is, or what's the point of you writing this? And so that's really, really clear, and everything needs to have alignment. That's one of the main issues, is if there's not alignment from the start. I'm not saying you have to tell us your epistemology, your ontology. Like, that's not the type of journal we are either. But we kind of need to know where you're going from the beginning, and you got to tie a nice bow on it. One of the most common comments I give is, please give me implications for research. Like, what should someone do tomorrow? What should they be researching? Also give me implications for practice. What is the leader on the ground supposed to do? That's the mission. That follows our, what we call our community development principles of good practice. We need people to do that. So please tell us how we can use this, because we want to transfer this knowledge out into the community. Again, we do have some guides. I recommend, if you're a qualitative researcher, to explore Cynthia Leach. She's at Arizona State and Louis Sias. They wrote a really nice social work piece on having a guide on how to do qualitative research. Community development could use one. We could use our own, to be honest with you. So if you're out there and perhaps you're a seasoned educator and like you're ready to kind of leave us with some beautiful knowledge, like this is an opportunity for quantitative and qualitative research or a particular method, ethnography. Just share with us, what do you think is the best approaches? Maybe you've been doing community capitals for a long time, or ripple effects mapping. Like, leave us with like a guide on how us as editors really should be looking at these pieces and what's quality and what's not, because we get a lot of things that are just kind of like picking at the sides, and we would love to have something that can be a little bit more definitive with some oomph that we can put forward. We are taking folks to join the editorial board. Anyone interested, please email me. I can actually send you the most recent link. This may be our previous one if that QR code is not working. But if you submit an article to our journal, you're automatically added to our reviewer list unless you opt out. If you have never submitted an article to us and you would like to be a reviewer, you can contact Sophia and I, and we can show you where to click on the Scholar One system to do that. We always need more and more reviewers, and it's really, really fun to do reviews. We are not a high pressure review system in us. We, of course, want qualitative stuff, but we're not going to be asking for the minutia. We don't necessarily need you to attach a file that has all your line by line edits. That's not what we need. If you feel empowered to do it, I'm not going to turn you down, but it really is a different situation because we have such a broad variety of pieces, and we really want to support folks. So this is our further information. We actually found a new book reviews editor. Scott Tate is actually our book reviews editor. Ann Silvis did a wonderful job for us. And so if you have any outstanding book reviews, or if you want to work on a book review, or you have one you're working on, I'm glad to put you in touch with Scott. He's wonderful. And Ann has been incredible. She's finishing off the handoff, and just big thanks to Ann for all her help. So at this time, I think we can open up to questions from folks. We can take some in the chat. Tammy, what do you think is going to be best in your experience to help us, or I can just field them if you want?
You can go ahead and field them if you're comfortable.
Sure.
Thank you.
So maybe
Greg,
folks want.
may I have a very
Yeah.
brief comment
Let's
before
do
you
that.
start answering?
Yeah.
I know that it's less and less needed with AI, but keep in mind that Taylor and Francis provides editing services, and they can always help with English translations, artwork preparation. I want to mention this because we receive a large volume of articles outside of the US.
On the AI aspect, some journals have moved to having you affirm that you did not use AI to help you with a review. Our editorial board and our editorial team, we have associate editors, has not met to make a decision on that. We're doing some self-reflective thinking on that. But I will say, I would prefer, if you're using something like Grammarly to help you, round out your pieces, that's not a huge problem. There's a difference between AI writing and assistance, right? And I think if you're still using your unique content, there are concerns of you dropping an article that someone published into an AI thing and saying, "Hey, read this for me and grade it for me." That's not the point. We want assistance, right? And there's privacy issues, and now you've put it out in there to the database, so those are things to think about. I will say, if you want AI to explain to you whether or not you wrote a cohesive review, like where was I clear and where was I not, it's a really good tool for that too. So having it like round out your with language issues, that's really helpful, or having it kind of say, did I give enough information or was I clear here? Because having a clear review for our authors always helps. So those would be some of my recommendations. Again, our journal hasn't set a policy yet. Additionally, some journals out there are now putting together policies around stating your positionality, where you have to say, like for me, I would say, me as a white man from the United States. We do not have a policy or set there. We did have some generative conversations around what are the strategies for navigating those who want to and those who might be in opposition to that at 2 conferences ago at Community Development Society when we were in Omaha. And that was really helpful and has guided us. We're not getting pressure from Taylor and Francis either way, but just keeping that in mind, if you do want to express yourself in that way and you don't know how, we can provide some guidelines in those aspects. But keeping that in mind that if you just have a question, like you're seeing a trend in a different journal and you're wondering if we do the same or have them, just reach out to any of us. We'd be glad to walk you through it.
I think I would just comment on what Craig just said too. One of the difficulties that I think we're finding, or at least as the ones that I'm reviewing, sometimes it's really good quality research, but because English is a second language in many cases, which I completely respect, but it really limits the ability or the success of the in the review process. Because as a reviewer receiving that paper that's not well structured, not good grammar, these kinds of things, it really kind of casts, I think, a negative film on the research, which it really shouldn't. So using AI to smooth out sentences, clean up the grammar, that sort of stuff after you've done the research and after you've reported it, I think is probably a good strategy in many instances. And I've actually tried to work with some people to do that. But it's something you sort of have to draw the line on. I think also having someone else review your work is really important. So as you have the paper ready to get sent in, as Craig says, have someone read it, look it over, make some changes. I think it really helps. It'll speed up the process a lot.
Rhonda, do you have any particular advice at this time as we're waiting for questions?
Sure. My advice is always identify your first choice journal and format it and make sure it's a good fit for that journal. If it comes back as a reject, always have a second journal in mind. Usually start out, you have a list of like 3 that you think it could fit. But typically at some point in the process, you'll get a major revision, or maybe you get lucky and it's minor revisions, but at some point you'll get feedback to make it an even better article. And by the time you're finished with that whole process, you'll have a stronger article. So don't get discouraged. One thing I've seen through the years is that particularly younger scholars starting out take it very personally and get hit hard when they get a reject. It's not a rejection of the person, it's a rejection of the work didn't fit or didn't quite make its point, but it's not something to just give up and walk away. You have to keep trying, and that's why it's always good to have at least 3 potential publication outlets for your work so that you can go through that process and you'll be a stronger writer because of that.
That's fantastic. I remember getting that advice, Rhonda.
Yeah, I
I was-
remember giving it to you, and you've listened well. You've done really well.
Thanks, Rhonda. We got a message in the chat that asked about it's if our journal has fees. There's no pay for submission and there's no pays for reviews. The only thing that you would possibly pay for, there are 2 things. One would be to publish open access so that you keep your copyright and then the journal blasts it out into the ether and then anyone can download it, anyone can read it. It's not behind a paywall. The second thing would be if your team decided to do what's called an off-cycle publication, which would be we're in community development, we're allowed to do 2 a year if we wanted to do that. And that costs around $4,000. And that would be a special issue that essentially you're getting, for lack of a better term, a rush job on. And so this is the way of saying, we want to actually have this, and maybe we built it into our grant so that you're not waiting in the queue of the general articles. We often just, like, there's sort of a, they're all issues to us are special. They're just some special topics, right? Or different themes. So generally, if we say the word thematic issue, we're saying we're going to have a collection of articles around a particular theme that's going to be in our normal publication cycle. If you wanted to do a special issue that has an off-cycle print, that basically when all the articles come in, boom, it comes out, that you have to pay for. So those are the only 2 things that would ever cost money to authors or teams in our system. Other questions?
There's one question that was, how are you distinguishing between a reviewer and a referee? At least in my comments, I wasn't. I considered those the same thing. A person who would actually receive an article to review, and then that person would make the decision whether or not it should be published or not published or minor or major revision. So probably just used the wrong terms or used them too loosely.
Yeah, that's fair. In our system, let me just kind of clarify, for community development, we have the editor here. Sophia is managing editor, and then we have associate editors who are assigned the articles. So we farm them out to them. That's a nice way too of, like, our associate editors also like to publish in our journals. So we have different people that they see, which is really good. And so that associate editor will synthesize and offer their own comments on the reviewers. And then it comes to myself, and Sophia will do an initial check and a final check. But it comes to myself then to send the final decision letter. And so it is pretty rare that I ever disagree with our associate editors. It does happen, but it's pretty rare. We do have the option in our journal to do a major revision, and which means you receive reviews. The reviewers, for the most part, or the editor thinks you can actually make changes. They're going to be substantial revisions. We also have minor revisions, which means not that much. But we also have a reject and resubmit. And a reject and resubmit in our world for community development, I'll speak for alone, means we don't think your paper is ready to move on. However, should you make substantial changes and send it back to us, we will give you fresh reviews. And we're not going to do that all the time, because if we keep on going back and getting you fresh reviews, then it's not working. But we will do this fresh review process where we don't ask the same people to review it, but we need you to address the previous review issues. And so we do that as well. Sometimes you may get that reject and resubmit automatically from me in particular, because you didn't do some of those basic things that we said at the beginning. And so I didn't even get it to the review stage because I needed you to do some other things. I didn't want to waste your time, and I didn't want to waste our reviewers' time. And I wanted to make sure. And if you ever get like an immediate desk reject that says, hey, you can resubmit, that's a good sign actually, because it means that we actually care about it. If you get a desk reject that says the author's not, the editor's not interested in this piece at this time, that means you got to find a new place. But if you're getting in and saying, hey, if you make these changes or make these things, we'd be interested in sending it out, that means that you got a shot. It's just, we didn't want you to get dinged right away and then go through this whole process and sit there and wait when you have an article you're already excited about that you can maybe make changes at the beginning.
And to this
we
point,
tried.
Greg, oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that when we reject, sometimes it's just because the paper is good. It just doesn't belong under our coverage. So as a result, we may say, well, this might be better suited or more suited to XYZ place. So it's a positive sort of reject. So as Rhonda said, I don't think getting a reject should be considered devastating. Getting a reject should be basically guidance, or at least as we try to see it. And we try to tell you where it might work if in fact we know. I'm sure Craig does the same thing. And so it's the idea of, I think the goal of both of these journals and the editors involved are really to cause more high quality research on community economic development to be out in the field. So, and we're really, we're sort of quotes on your side as compared to some sort of a, artificial barrier you've got to get through or a wall you've got to overcome. So kind of approach it that way. When you get a review, particularly when it says that, in fact, no, we're not interested in this journal, then see it as a positive that we think has got merit, as Greg said, but it probably belongs somewhere else.
Because sometimes people send a draft with the perception that they will make changes after they get feedback to work it up later. But in reality, you should be submitting the strongest version of your paper possible.
Right.
Other questions? I can think of some that we've gotten often. I will say, if you feel that you did not get a review that was fair, it happens, and let us know. I'm very open about this. I do fire reviewers. The way I do it is actually quiet fire them. By that, I mean, if I got a review that was one sentence, I go into the ScholarOne system and I delete them from our list. If I get a review from someone who said something that was uncalled for and was, people have bad days. People have moments where they don't put the best themselves forward. I will address that with the author. I will address that with the reviewer if the reviewer has been good in the past. But if this is a person who's an unknown entity that somehow got on our list because maybe they submitted a paper a long time ago and I don't know what their things are, we just remove them from our list. Because we have had a lot of people, again, you're automatically added into the system. And we do get bounce backs from reviewers that have moved positions, things like that. So if you have moved a position, please do let us know or go update in ScholarOne. But we want to make sure that, that we want publishing not to be necessarily the most enjoyable experience, but we want publishing to be a fair and an experience where people are well treated. And so we like to, for lack of a better term, nip that in the bud. All right. Well, I would love, since we're not seeing a lot more questions come in, I would love to close us out by going around to the panel and say, what if you saw an article tomorrow about a particular topic that would really excite you, what would it be? Now, for me, my go-to has always been libraries. I love articles on libraries, and community development doesn't have enough on how awesome libraries are. So there's mine.
I would have to say, how are we going to adjust and use the tools of all the new AI and other digital and data science tools for helping lift up community development, economic development outcomes in our regions and our towns and cities, states. So I'd love to see more about that because it's here, it's coming, and we need to be able to harness that technology rather than just wait to see what happens with it.
I think I'd like to see something or more work done on what the changes are going on with respect to industry and various things, particularly on the incoming generation or the new generation, the people from 20 to 30, let's say. It seems to me that they're going to be entering really a very different world. And I think that we need to understand better what kind of requirements they're going to have to face in terms of skills and so forth, as well as what kind of an environment they actually will be working in the future. So I'd like to see more work on that. And I think that's really worldwide.
That's a great question. I would be interested in seeing more papers in my field in economics because they can be applied to pretty much everywhere besides business, health, transportation, housing, geography, public administration, sociology. So pretty much what tourism, what we already receive, but have that extra layer of economics in it.
Well,
Great.
thank you all for being a part of the webinar. Much thanks to the panelists. And there was mention of our conference in 2026. If any of you would like more information about the 2026 CDS Annual Conference, it will be held in Savannah, Georgia, July 19th to the 22nd. And also, if you're not a CDS member and you're interested in more information and to join, you can go to our website at cdsociety.org. There's also a contact form if you have any follow-up questions. We will be sharing the slides and the video with everybody who registered. And again, thank you so much for attending. And I wish everybody a wonderful day or evening.